Is Childe, Tartaglia, Ajax really morally ambiguous, or is he just evil? He is everyone's favorite unhinged yet wholesome villain. He shows very little regard for human life, yet is also shown to be someone who is fairly kind and is also family oriented. He writes letters to his sister, he takes good care of his brothers, and he cooks and he cleans, and you get the point. Childe is a walking contradiction. And because of this, I believe Childe is one of the most complex characters in Genshin, which unfortunately also means he's one of the most mischaracterized in the game, solely because there are just a lot more layers to him than what we would usually get in a Genshin character. For a lot of people, he's either a mass murderer or he's the wholesome big brother who is just doing his job and isn't actually evil. Nothing in between. As for me, I don't think he's either of those things, and here's why. Going back to his actions all the way back in the Liyue Archon quest, which was released in 1.0, we first meet Childe when he saved us from the Millelith after Morax's death, winning the heart of thousands through that one scene alone. After Paimon let slip that we are also looking for the Seven ourselves, Childe sends us to meet with the Adepti, hence the Sigil of Permission. He then introduces us to Zhongli and then offers to sponsor Morax's funeral, and also later on is convinced that we, the Traveler, took the Gnosis first from the Exuvia, hence beating him to it, and then here he challenges the Traveler into a fight, which he then uses his illusion and later on his Foul Legacy transformation. And after our fight with Childe is the scene where a lot of people always bring up when discussing Childe's morality. And by that I mean it's the scene where Childe decides to summon Osial, threatening the lives of people in Liyue in order to lure Morax out. To his defense, Childe does say that he doesn't like that he had to resort to this because he knows there will be a lot of casualties, but he did it anyway. It's also worth noting that Childe is gambling here. He's on the 50-50. He doesn't really know that Morax is alive. He's only entertaining the possibility that he is, and he still made the decision to go with it. And I'm not denying Childe's willingness to gamble the lives of so many people makes him anything but an unhinged sociopath, but there's just still so many layers to his character that it's hard for me to just label him as evil. And before you come at me, no, I'm not defending his actions or saying that he's a good person because he has some wholesome moments with his family and Yoimiya for some reason. No. One of the reasons why Childe is so fascinating as a character to a lot of people is because we, as the players, often see two very separate sides of Childe, one being Childe or Tartaglia, the other being Ajax. Childe or Tartaglia is the youngest harbinger who has a concerning amount of bloodlust. He directly says that he's mainly in the Fatui because he gets the opportunity to get into more fights than the average person would. At least that is one of the main reasons he's there. Even though he outwardly dislikes how the Fatui uses scheming as their modus operandi, he's still dedicated to his job and will follow the Sarita's orders without question. He's also someone who is willing to sacrifice thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people in order to do his job, as we have witnessed and established in the Liyue Archon quest. Childe, or Tartaglia, is cruel. While he is reluctant to kill innocent people most of the time, he is still very much comfortable in doing so. And this is why a lot of people often have the misconception that he's just irredeemably evil. But also at the same time, this cruelty and insane bloodlust serves as a stark contrast to another side of Childe, who we often see time and time again as someone who is friendly, caring, and compassionate. This is also the reason why a lot of people who are at the other end of the spectrum mischaracterize Childe as someone who is ultimately good and justifies a lot of his decisions that are clearly immoral. Now, Ajax is in the Fatui because it obviously pays well and it allows him to provide for his family, the family that he puts above everything else and also the ones he won't shut up about. Ajax is the one who went out of his way to protect his brother's innocence and put his own life at risk while doing so. The one who hangs out with Yoimiya to buy presents from Inazuma for his siblings? Yeah, that's Ajax. Ajax is also the innocent boy who fell into the abyss when he was 14. So does this mean that Childe is ultimately a good person inside just because he has this side to him? No, the answer is no, absolutely not. There is clearly a side of him that understands how messed up he is, hence his determination in protecting Tuser's childhood innocence for as long as he can, even though it may not necessarily be what Tuser actually needs. Imagine the betrayal that kid is gonna feel when he grows up and finds out that his darling older brother has been lying to him this whole time. Childe Child being able to show love for his family is in no way an indication of him being a good person deep inside, but it also doesn't mean he's a murderous maniac that some people make him out to be. Even as a harbinger, Child seems to be one of the nicer ones. And I know that's a pretty low bar. He cooks, he cleans, and he seems to treat his subordinates like human beings, at least slightly nicer than, for example, how Scaramouche would treat his own subordinates, which is a pretty low bar, I understand, but Scaramouche slaps his subordinates for absolutely no reason and is violent with them and sees them as literal like scum of the earth. So Child is still somewhat nicer compared to his co-workers. And I mean, again, yes, it's a pretty low bar considering who his co-workers are, but the point I'm trying to make here is that Child still has a lot of his humanity even as one of the harbingers. And I think it's important to point out that Child, while yes, he's there mainly for the fights, but that's not the only reason why he's with the Fatui. Child also shows loyalty to the Tsaritsa and her goals, and he's clearly willing to put a lot of people at harm to achieve said goals. So he clearly has his own priorities and reasons on why he's in the Fatui and is actively supporting the Tsaritsa, and I think as long as we, the players, don't come into conflict with his goals, Child will remain indifferent to us. Fun, even. Because the Traveler and Child formed this rivalry / camaraderie type of bond, and it's actually really interesting, but more on this later. And again, he knows what he's doing is shady. He's not trying to pass as a good person. There isn't even any guarantee that if Child isn't with the Fatui that he would be this wholesome, well-adjusted guy that some people envision him to be. Because in reality, he would still get into fights, because let's face it, he's unstable as hell, so he will probably wreak havoc somewhere else on his own. And let's not forget, the reason he joined the Fatui in the first place is because his dad sent him there, because he just kept getting into fights after fights and is wreaking havoc everywhere after his experience in the Abyss. While we're at it, let's discuss that. Let's discuss his time in the Abyss. If you're familiar with Child and you've made it this far, you probably also know that he was more or less a normal kid living in Snezhnaya until he fell into the Abyss. And as of the recording of this video, not a lot is revealed about his time there. We only know the following. One is that he ran away from home craving for an adventure and accidentally fell into the Abyss. And I quote, "He lost his footing and fell into a bottomless crack in the earth's surface. There he met Skirk, who taught him how to fight and survive and basically everything he knows, including his foul legacy transformation." If his dead fish eye didn't already give it away, the experience in the Abyss left him not only traumatized but also with a few screws loose because he came out a completely different child. Pun intended. It's only after this experience that he becomes this bloodthirsty, unhinged person that we know in the game. So it's pretty clear that the Abyss was such a pivotal moment in Child's life. Like, it changed him for the worse, which is a shame, I think. Because I personally think that if Child never fell into the Abyss, he would have become an adventurer, like a normal adventurer. Aside from the fact that he literally ran away from home looking for an adventure and that's how he fell into the Abyss in the first place, his character story also mentions how much he loves his dad's stories about legendary adventurers. He also says to the Traveler that if not for his job, he would love to travel around with them because, again, he sees the Traveler as his rival or his equal, someone who shares similar values when it comes to family and wanting to protect your siblings, which is also probably a big reason why Child is so fond of the Traveler. In his voice lines, he does mention that he looks forward to bumping into the Traveler again, so they're like foils to each other, sort of. So it's not hard to imagine a less unhinged Child in an alternate reality being an adventurer and traveling alongside us. There's also this long Reddit post from a few years ago about how Child is literally just a guy, and it's so good. I'll link it below. The post points out how despite his dramatic backstory, Child doesn't seem to make a big deal out of it. He does, however, make a big deal about ice fishing, cooking, cleaning, and his siblings, which is hilarious, and it is truly the best part of his character. I mean, even amongst the Harbingers, which is filled with divine puppets, a 500-year-old witch, a survivor of Chondria, a mad scientist with a bunch of Horcruxes, and whatever the hell this guy is, Child seems the most normal out of the bunch, which is amazing, and I love it. And this is also partially why I think people forget that being the nice and normal one amongst the Harbinger is such a low bar. It's literally so low. Childe isn't magically a good person deep down just because he's the nicest one out of the most unhinged group of people in the game. To me, in a game filled with character tropes, Childe truly stands out. Yes, he has some tropes of his own because let's face it, no character can truly escape from tropes in a gacha game, but Hoyo seems to allow him to have more layers than most of the characters, speaking for both male and female characters. In typical Hoyo fashion, at least in Genshin, they sprinkled lore-relevant context in limited time events. For Childe, it was during the 2.2 Labyrinth Warrior event. If anyone remembers that whole thing with Xinyan, Shikitaisho, and the abandoned child pursuing Scaramouche storyline, one important character detail that is actually revealed about Childe in that event is that he directly states that he doesn't really believe in good or evil. So long as he gets to do what he enjoys, which in this case, surprise surprise, fighting, he doesn't mind being turned into a weapon or serving the Tsaritsa. As long as it doesn't conflict with his own personal priorities and goals, Childe will do as he's told. Will he always like it? Not necessarily, but he will still do so as long as it serves his interests. And even with everything we've just established, Childe, at the end of the day, is a wild card. He says in the same event that he doesn't really care for allegiance or duty, so even if he has repeatedly stated that he's loyal to the Tsaritsa, there's really no telling what he's capable of doing once the Fatui doesn't give him the chance to fight as much or doesn't provide his family with the security like they do now. Because right now, Childe is able to provide for his family and freely travel because the Fatui, the rooster specifically, is taking care of his family back in Snezhnaya. And by taking care of, I'm pretty sure the rooster is just holding Childe's family as collateral just in case, Childe turns against them for whatever reason. It wouldn't be too out of character for Childe to switch sides if he no longer sees any value in whatever the Tsaritsa is trying to achieve, especially if it involves his family. It's what makes him so interesting, and this is just scratching the surface. There is so much about Childe that is yet to be revealed, and that's why I believe it's almost impossible to call him anything but morally gray, because as of now, Hoyo has left him in a very ambiguous state. If let's say Childe were to make a choice between living the life he wants, and by that I mean literally having endless fights for him to enjoy, or the safety of his family, which do you think he would choose? For me, I lean towards him choosing his family because I think Childe has established how much and how willing he is to put them above everything else in his life. But Childe is so unpredictable, I honestly don't know. And that's why he's so friggin' intriguing as a character. And I think this ambiguity and the inability for us to pigeonhole him into being good, well, not good, at least a decent person, or evil, is the point of his character. He's supposed to be someone that is so unhinged and so unpredictable who could switch sides at any moment. And I think Hoyo will leave him that way until we reach Snezhnaya. And while I want to complain about how little Childe we have gotten over the years, I'm also glad that Hoyo seems to be taking their time with him. I would really be disappointed if he gets killed off without any proper build-up or narrative payoff like another Harbinger that we know and loved. Anyway, I think Childe is morally ambiguous or gray, at least as of now, and he is one of the better written characters in Genshin, and if it's not obvious already, he is also one of my favorites, so maybe this video was a bit biased. Let me know what you think of Childe in the comments. Do you agree or disagree? I know Childe can be a polarizing topic for some reason, so please stay civil. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye!